Countless experts unanimously predicted a new Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Venezuela. This is the end for Trump, they said. He's stuck, bogged down, got himself into trouble. Well, dragged America into a new nightmare. Today, gentlemen, you will learn many interesting things, which we will discuss a bit later. Is it really as all the experts predicted to us, so to speak, with one voice? Is it true? Is what they promised actually happening? In the neighboring country where American tanks did not enter and American missiles did not fall, on the streets of that land and in its jungles, there were no endless battles with hundreds of thousands killed and wounded. A lightning-fast operation, plus an offer to the one who, in case the president left, was supposed to replace him. In other words, to the vice president of that same country. Silence. But what type of silence? Is it the stormy silence before a tempest or the obedient silence of sheep? To figure it out, let's take a look at CBS, which used to be a very left-leaning TV network, but is now moving toward a more objective, more centrist position, I would say. They sent a correspondent there. Here are the results of her week-long work in Venezuela. But Spanish is her native language, so for her there was no problem, so to speak, talking to people, conducting interviews, communicating, and figuring things out.
2 months after the removal of Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela is undergoing a rapid political transformation. Last week, President Trump praised the cooperation of acting President Delcy Rodriguez when the U.S. announced the restoration of diplomatic relations with Venezuela. The Trump administration has focused on the country's oil potential. CBS News national correspondent Lilia Luciano is now with us live from Caracas. She's been following this story. Good morning, Lilia. You've talked to people, spent time there, so tell us, what's new? What is the current political and social mood in Venezuela?
Well, Earl, I've been here for a week now, and it's nothing like what we all expected when we first heard the threats coming from President Trump and the White House toward Nicolas Maduro. And then, on the most dramatic day, as we witnessed, watching it unfold over several hours, in the middle of the night, when he was captured and brought to the United States, where he is still in prison.
The most important thing she said was that the situation and the mood of the country are not at all what we expected. So what's going on? And what is not happening that everyone expected and assumed would happen?
We never expected everything to be as calm as it is now. I talked to experts, I talked to people right on the street, to people on both sides of the barricades. People who support Maduro tell me that, first of all, they expect his return, and that they also trust Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's vice president. A very important, prominent figure in the regime, part of all the repressions and everything people voted for Edmundo González Urrutia again in 24. You might remember, this is the candidate who ran in 24 when Maria Corina Machado were disqualified. All the power structures except for Nicolas Maduro and a few officials remain in power here.
None of those who worked with Maduro have been arrested or replaced the army. So there's no point in resisting. Who are you supposed to fight anyway? No one is arresting politicians at night. You'll say everything is just like it was before, but no, it's not. In fact, it's the opposite. But there is no war, no revolution, no counter-revolution, because there's no one to fight against. There is no opponent. At the Shield America Summit, Trump, for the first time, he mentioned Rodriguez, whom he didn't invite to this summit for several reasons I've already explained. He didn't call her an interim or transitional president, he just said President Rodriguez. The whole world noticed this. All of Venezuela noticed this. And the opposition, you might ask, and the people who were legally elected but removed from power by Maduro at the time. And those who are in prison listen further. You will find this interesting. You need to understand how a great man acts. President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Everything is simple and logical. But if everything is so simple, why has no one acted like this before? It's simple when at least someone has done it, and then it becomes easy and clear for everyone. Before that, it was difficult and unclear.
So people who support Maduro are happy to support Rodriguez. President Trump has now recognized Delcy Rodriguez not just as acting or interim president, but as the full president of Venezuela and praised her work. On the other side, you have people who support Maria Corina Machado and the opposition. Look, these people are speaking out, including several political prisoners who were released after Maduro came to power.
That is, political prisoners were released from prison, but no one in the U.S. press is talking about it.
They tell me that they are patient, that they are preparing for a future democracy, but they understand and hope that this transition was necessary to preserve peace. And they hope that the United States, that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will continue to support them, that President Trump will continue to meet with Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader he has met with. Last Friday, a day before he named Delcy Rodriguez the president of this country.
So, a day before Trump named Rodriguez president, he summoned the opposition leader and explained to her what he was going to do. And apparently he received full support from the opposition, who also don't want tanks on the streets of Caracas or corpses all over the city. But let's look at the situation from the perspective of U.S. interests. The first task is to stop the drugs coming from Venezuela to the United States of America. The second task is to stop the oil going to China. The third task is to prevent a civil war from breaking out and, in the longer term, to bring Venezuela back to, let's call it, democracy, free market, capitalism. And finally, of course, it's to destroy the cartels. Let's take a look. Drugs have been stopped, at least temporarily. We'll see what happens next. Oil is now under U.S. control. Venezuela will receive and is already receiving for its survival. They are receiving more for oil production than they receive from China. Plus, the U.S. has brought in specialists and investors to double oil production and influence global prices. There is no civil war or resistance to the U.S. But what will happen next? Well, let's believe that Trump has proven he knows what he's doing, because none of the predictions have come true so far. Let's hope they don't come true in the future either.
It's not madness because everything is very calm, but it's the craziest scenario considering all the scenarios we've heard from experts before the capture of Maduro. And the last thing people who support Maduro tell me, look, it wasn't an invasion with American troops on the ground or massive bombings or anything like that.
Epi from Lilia says, no one expected Trump to carry out this operation so wisely, in which he achieved what he wanted, which was his goal. No missiles, no planes, no shooting, and no mass killings. The strategy in Iran, of course, is different, but the components are similar. We are not seeking to change the regime. That is up to the people of Iran. What we want is, first, for Iran to give up the production of weapons of mass destruction. This includes nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, as well as the means to deliver these weapons of mass destruction over long distances. Medium and long-range missiles. Second, to stop oil supplies to China. That matches up, doesn't it? Third, to release political prisoners. And a complete halt to financing terrorism. Of course, we would like a regime change, but that is not the goal of our actions in Iran. After the shooting of 35,000 unarmed demonstrators in Iran, we would like those responsible to be held accountable. But again, we would like that, but it is not the goal of our operation. We clearly distinguish between our wishes and the objectives we set for the military. Will we help the opposition? Well, it depends on what you call help. I don't think we will be flying helicopters and shooting at government troops. On the contrary, we will try, well, look at Venezuela to prevent such clashes and killings. But if the opposition wants to, they will do what they decide. By the way, this is a lesson for both Ukraine and Russia, where they still can't understand that Trump is a phenomenon, not a power. He is a reflection of their own thoughts and ideas. The phenomenon called Trump wants to end the bloodshed, not to change the government. He probably does care who will be in charge, whether it's Rodriguez or the opposition. But he won't go to war to restore justice as it is understood by Ukrainians, Russians, Iranians, or Venezuelans. Whether it's Putin in Moscow, Zelensky in Kyiv, or their successors, their opponents are not America's business, Trump believes. We have a preference, but that's all. The task in Ukraine is to stop the war, secure the status quo, and try to maintain that status quo for a reasonably long period of time. But neither Ukrainians nor Iranians understand this. They think in different terms. Here is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, after the bombings of the fortified island of Hormuz.
Foreign Minister Araghchi, thank you very much for your time this morning. I would like to start with the overnight news that the United States carried out a military strike on Karg Island. The President of the United States said that out of decency, he decided not to destroy all the oil infrastructure on the island. However, if Iran or anyone else takes any action that hinders the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. Let me start with a question about what happened on Karg Island and what Iran's response to these strikes is.
Well, thank you very much
for having me.
I think our armed forces have already responded that they will take retaliatory measures if our oil and energy infrastructure is attacked. And will they attack any energy infrastructure in the region that belongs to an American company or where an American company is a shareholder? An American company or an American company is a detail.
It reminds me of a story my wife once told me. In Crimea, back in the distant Soviet times, a good group gathered in the hotel lobby. Rada Volshadinova, if you remember her, cosmonaut Sevastianov, Yosef Kobzon, Snaily, my wife, though she wasn't my wife yet back then, and I think Keo. The attendant refused to turn on the elevator, saying that after midnight the elevator needed to rest. Gypsy Rada. So she was a little drunk. Her maiden name was Bronya Zolotaryova, and suddenly she spat right in his face. At the attendant. Everyone was stunned. The attendant wiped off the spit and sternly said to Bronya, "If you spit again, then I'll..." And Rada, also known as Bronya, immediately spat right in his face again. It's not about the fact that Rada spat. Of course, she crossed all the lines, and that's why Kobzon and Sevastianov wanted to apologize the next day, but about the idea that if you can really respond, you should dare them to repeat it. And that's when it happens. Because everyone will understand that you can't, and they will definitely repeat it.
Subtitles. Last night they attacked Karg Island and Abu Island. Welcome to our short-range missiles. System. And they did this from territory belonging to our neighbors. We did this from our neighbors' land.
Notice the compassionate expression on the face of the MSNBC host. He just melts with sympathy for a regime that has been killing Americans for 46 years, shouting that it will destroy us, funding terrorists against America all over the world, and has just shot 35,000 peaceful protesters. Interesting, and here you have Iran. Ayatollahs, the core, the guards who throw gays off rooftops, cut up Jews, including American ones, into pieces. They believe that non-believers, meaning those who don't believe in Allah in their Shiite way, should believe only their way. No other way of believing is allowed. Of course, they think all are filthy dogs and must be destroyed. But they're dressed like us, neatly groomed, and I'm sure they smell good. And why wouldn't they? Persians were magnificent. Empires, when the Arabs were still wandering the desert and making huts out of camel dung.
These night attacks were tracked by our forces, and now it's clear that they were launched from the territory of the UAE. From two locations situated in the territory of the United Arab Emirates, from Ras Al Khaimah and from a point very close to the city of Dubai. And it's very, dangerous that they are using densely populated areas to launch, rockets against us.
Suddenly, Iran remembered that they are firing at very densely populated areas. The truth is, the Americans do everything they can to avoid hitting residential and civilian targets. They never aim at them. Well, as they say, things happen. Unfortunately, it has already happened twice during the war. I think twice. And Iran is trying to hit densely populated areas in Israel. But MSNBC won't ask them about this and won't ask about the shootings of civilians. They have this kind of arrangement with the Iranians. MSNBC can do whatever it wants to, both of them, and that's how it is. The same goes for CNN, as long as it's bad for Trump. Even if it ends up being bad for America, that means for us. Yes, MSNBC had changed its name to MS Now. It turned into MS Now. But just changing 2 letters didn't change the essence, which I would say is still vile.
We will definitely strike back, but we try to be careful not to attack any populated areas.
And this so-called journalist didn't respond to this blatant lie, didn't even mention that the Iranians are firing at Tel Aviv and Haifa. I have lived for many years in both places with warheads filled with shrapnel, which are specifically designed to kill as many civilians as possible. And finally, Abbas was asked about the last meeting with the American negotiation group, after which the U.S. decided to stop negotiating, saying it was pointless, and to start military action. Why? What happened? Why did the U.S. decide that the negotiations were being conducted just to buy time?
It was said by the American counterparts, well, of course, I understand why they say such things. After all, they want to justify a completely unjustified act of aggression. So they are trying to find some excuses for themselves. I never said that we were going to produce bombs. I said that we have 440 kilograms of 60% enriched material.
Vitkov reported that Abbas got nervous and started shouting that we have 440 kilograms of uranium, which can easily be purified to bomb grade, that Iran will make 10 bombs, and then...
If it is further enriched, it could be enough for 10 bombs, as your own experts claim. So, we are ready to give them up and hand them over. We are ready to dilute them, to mix them to lower levels of enrichment. And in saying this, I would like to emphasize that the concession we are making is truly very significant. That's him.
He's speaking now, well, after almost 2 weeks of bombings. He didn't say that back then. He said something quite the opposite.
But how they interpreted it, I don't know. Maybe because of a lack of knowledge, maybe because of, their intentions to justify, as I already said, an act of aggression that cannot be justified. I really hope that the true story of what happened on February 26th in Geneva will become known to people in the near future. We nearly agreed. Thank you for your time, Mr. Minister.
Not a single serious question. Everything so that the enemy, and Iran, gentlemen, is an enemy of the United States of America, could show its human face. I think that MSNBC, or whatever it's called, MSN Now, CNN, and the likes of the New York Times are also enemies, no less. And maybe, by the way, for us as well. And even more dangerous. Unlike Abbas, who is just doing his job, really. He lies because it's his duty. If the situation were different, he would lie differently or about something else. Iran's problem is that their only effective strategy against the U.S., which is attacking oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, has infuriated China. And that's why the president of Iran, who physically can't stop the IRGC, just can't. They don't obey, that's it. Period. He would really like to, but he can't. He stated the following: China's financial sector now doesn't want to finance much, so it won't participate. Not only are the Chinese refusing to finance Iran, they're also demanding that shipping be opened immediately.
By trying to antagonize or challenge the United States, who are they actually dealing with here? Well, let's talk about the Gulf countries first.
Because the West won't let those tankers reach China. The U.S. will take the oil in exchange for the oil that was stopped by Iran.
And now this consequence is also hitting them directly. And then, of course, we have to talk about Beijing, which now doesn't just seem to be almost changing its position or at least asking for peace. But you have to imagine, in the broader context of the operation, Epic Fury is also watching as one of their main potential future military allies is suffering defeat. Meanwhile, Beijing is largely abandoning them, which also has implications for a potential World War III scenario in Taiwan. We'll discuss that. All of this here today, friends, but again, these are really very interesting events coming from China's new changed response.
China has changed its tone. If at first there were a lot of words and little action, now the words are the exact opposite of their earlier statements. Now China is accusing Iran of bombing neighboring countries.
China does not approve of attacking a Persian Gulf state and condemns all indiscriminate attacks on civilians and non-military targets. The urgent task is to immediately stop military actions and prevent further escalation of the conflict.
It wasn't said that the U.S. is the aggressor, that Iranian civilians are dying and suffering. No. China has a financial interest in getting oil and ending the war. I think Trump has already sent envoys to China. We will help stop the war in Hormuz, and you help stop the war in Donbass. But we have another front, ladies and gentlemen, called Cuba, the island of freedom. There's freedom there, the island of freedom from freedom. The island is kilometers away from Florida. 10 million people live there. Poor as church mice, as they say, or maybe rats. Well, anyway, one of those. As poor as either church mice or church rats. Kennedy tried to take it by force. Reagan and Clinton tried to starve them out. Trump offered to buy the island. The current leadership, meaning Diaz-Canel, gets a lot of money and an honorable departure wherever he wants. The Castro family gets immunity from prosecution. The population gets financial aid and help with economic restructuring. Diaz-Canel called the offer blackmail, genocide. At the same time, he called it a crime and entered into negotiations with the U.S. State Department.
Because of the oil blockade imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump, which is pushing Cuba deeper into an economic crisis, President Miguel Diaz-Canel said on Friday that his country has begun negotiations with the U.S. government as the communist-run country becomes increasingly desperate.
В страну не поступало топливо 3 месяца.
Diaz-Canel said he hopes the talks will lead the two longtime rivals away from confrontation. Trump stopped Venezuelan oil shipments to Cuba and threatened to impose tariffs against any country that sells oil to Cuba. It has been this way since the U.S. seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Cuba's most important ally.
On one hand, the elite have the opportunity to leave, or if they stay, avoid prosecution. On the other hand, let's say the country becomes so impoverished that it runs out of food. Food completely runs out, and millions of hungry and desperate Cubans will take to the streets. So the communists of Cuba have a choice: to leave honorably or risk riots, civil war, and destruction. Here's what the residents of Havana have to say.
We've collapsed. We can't go on like this anymore. I think that if this conversation...
Cuba and the United States will find a better solution, and so that Cuba will be better prepared, with more chances to move forward in this country, because we can't go on like this anymore. We can't, because the situation in Cuba is very difficult.
Trump has made a number of statements in recent weeks that Cuba is on the verge of collapse or ready to make a deal with the United States.
They desperately want a deal. You don't even know.
On Monday, he said that Cuba could be the subject of a friendly takeover. Then he added, and I quote, "It could be an unfriendly takeover."
Naturally, in Trump's style, it was said, "We want a friendly takeover of Cuba. If that doesn't work, then it will be an unfriendly takeover." But judging by the situation in Venezuela, the Cuban dictators would prefer a comfortable life somewhere else in the world rather than an honorable death. So what can we understand by looking at these three examples? The main thing is that experts who predict something big, based on past experience and their own reasoning on the expert's ability to calculate what might happen, should only be listened to for entertainment. They simply cannot predict the thought process of a truly brilliant person. After all, to predict it, you would have to be a genius yourself. And even when looking in the rearview mirror, they can't figure out what happened. Have you noticed that Trump's critics, they always talk about what will happen in the future, basing it on his terrible actions today? But as soon as something completely different happens, usually what Trump wanted and intended to do, they immediately forget about it and start shouting. And now, look, this fool, this bungler, this loser, he's leading us again to... And again, their imagination kicks in, ordinary as it is. Well, trying to predict the actions of a genius, well, it seems like it will always be this way. Those who are afflicted with Trump derangement seem like they'll stay in their own zone, no matter what. Not even the fact that Venezuela has quieted down, that Iran is almost no longer firing, that Cuba is preparing for a peaceful takeover, that in Africa the killing has ended in Rwanda and Congo, where 6 million people were killed in 30 years of conflict, that Azerbaijan has stopped fighting with Armenia, that Pakistan and India have stopped and are no longer shooting. In Rwanda and Cambodia, costing tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of lives. The same things were said about all of this. But after Trump successfully solved the problem, people immediately forgot about it, and they looked for a new one to attack and slander. And well, that's how it was. Years of conflicts. And the worse it was for us Americans, the more the experts, analysts, and commentators liked it. It's actually quite astonishing, by the way. Do you think God struck them by taking away their sanity? Or maybe they're just possibly such vile creatures that it's simply disgusting to breathe the same air as them.
He won't do anything.
Trump is not a boss at all. You've already understood everything. We've all understood already that the KGB handler is Putin and Trump is Agent Krasnov.
SKGB and Trump? He has an idea of economic policy like some, so to speak, native of the 19th century Midwest. He believes in tariffs, he believes in pressure, he believes in economic wars, he believes he can blackmail and intimidate. He actually has nothing to do with economics at all.
The 47th president is marking the first anniversary of his second term by plunging the world into chaos.
Continued. When Trump's team comes up with the idea that they know how to handle such global projects, don't fall for it. That's far from the truth.
This concludes our entertainment program for today called One Fool Said. I'd like to ask you to write to me and tell me which member of the Fab Four seems the most foolish to you. Well, I mean, which one of them is the most unpleasant? For you personally, because for one person it might be one, for another it might be someone else. If you find all four of them the most unpleasant, write that too. It's totally fine. All right, let's finish here. Until next time. To be continued.